My name is Emma, and I'm 29. Until 6 weeks ago, I thought my marriage with William was solid. Not perfect, but solid. The kind where you compromise, communicate, and build a life together. Turns out I was the only one who thought that. William and I met when we were both 24. He had just started as a junior analyst at a mid-sized investment firm in Chicago, and I was working in marketing. Our relationship was easy, messy in the best ways, full of late-night study sessions, cheap dinners, and laughter that made city streets feel smaller. 2 years later, we were married in a small, intimate ceremony, splitting a modest studio apartment and surviving on takeout and ambition. Over the past few years, William's career skyrocketed. Promotions came fast: senior analyst, associate portfolio manager, then vice president by the time he was 28. Our life improved with it: a paid-off house in Lincoln Park, a Mercedes SUV, business class trips for vacations. Meanwhile, I'd taken a step back from full-time work to focus on consulting and freelance marketing projects from home. William often teased me for never stopping, but I didn't mind. It gave me freedom, flexibility, and the illusion of balance. Then, 6 months ago, things started to change. It was subtle at first. Comments about the way I dressed, how I spent my free time, even small digs at my friends. "You're boring, Emma. All you ever do is work," he said one evening, sipping his wine at the kitchen island. He wanted $400 dinners, weekend getaways to Miami, a life that, at the time, I quietly funded while trying to close deals and manage my own work. I brushed it off. I thought it was a phase, stress from work, or maybe mid-20s restlessness manifesting in William. But I wasn't blind. I noticed the increased time away, boys' nights, wellness retreats. Weekends, he claimed, were networking events. And when he came back from one such retreat in California, there was a distance in his eyes, a quiet that hadn't been there before, and a strange lightness in the way he spoke about finding himself and living authentically. I asked him directly, twice, if something was going on. Both times he waved it off. "You're being paranoid and controlling," he said. I should have seen it then, but denial has a way of softening reality. 2 weeks ago, on a Wednesday, the world as I knew it ended. I was in back-to-back meetings when my phone buzzed. A text from William. "Emma, I'm at the lawyer's office starting the divorce. You're holding me back from the life I deserve." I read it 3 times, hoping the words would rearrange themselves, that this was some cruel mistake. They didn't. I set the phone down, feeling a strange combination of shock and numbness. My office, usually a sanctuary of order and productivity, suddenly felt suffocating. The quiet hum of fluorescent lights seemed to mock me. I typed back one word: understood. Sent it. And then I finished my workday like nothing had happened, but everything had changed. Here's what William didn't know. I am a meticulous planner. My life revolves around contingencies and preparation. For the past 2 months, I'd been quietly documenting everything: his unusual absences, his critiques, his extravagant spending, while consulting my lawyer, Patricia Chen, a 56-year-old powerhouse with the sharpest mind I've ever encountered. I didn't want a divorce, not yet. I wanted to be prepared. Patricia had walked me through every scenario. Illinois is a community property state. Without a prenup, assets acquired during marriage are split 50-50. We didn't have a prenup. William had convinced me it was unnecessary, and I, naive, had agreed. But the law only applied to assets at the time of divorce, not before. Timing was everything. That evening, I went home to an eerily empty house. William had taken clothes, his laptop, some personal effects, left behind only a note. No, not even a note, just the echo of his absence. I sat at the kitchen table and listed everything we owned. The Lincoln Park house, $1.2 million, fully paid. His Mercedes, $85,000. My car, $8,000. Checking accounts, $47,000. Savings, $180,000. Investments, $290,000. 401k, $175,000. Roughly $2 million, mostly built during the 3 years William had been chasing promotions, while I kept the household afloat and held the emotional reins. I made a decision that night. Not out of malice, not out of revenge, out of necessity. I transferred everything into an irrevocable trust with my sister Emily as trustee. Emily, 32, a tax attorney in Boston, had been warning me for months. "Emma, he's using you," she had said over Christmas. "Wake up. Protect yourself before it's too late." The paperwork was tedious, time-consuming, and expensive. $40,000 in taxes and legal fees, but worth every cent. Every asset, including my personal car, which had been mine before marriage, was now legally out of reach. The next morning, a text from an unknown number buzzed through my phone. "This is William. You blocked me?" Really mature, Emma. I hadn't blocked him. I had muted him. I didn't correct him. "My lawyer says we need full asset disclosure by Monday. Bank statements, property documents, everything." I replied simply, "Have your lawyer contact mine, Patricia Chen at Morrison & Associates." There was no more conversation, just a sense of quiet, heavy inevitability. And I realized, as I sat back in my chair, staring at the city lights beyond my window, my life had just pivoted. Everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and partnership had been replaced with strategy, calculation, and survival. And in that quiet, I also felt a strange, unfamiliar thing, relief, because now I was finally in control. By Saturday morning, everything had changed. The Lincoln Park house, the Mercedes, the investment accounts, the 401k. I had moved them all into an irrevocable trust, with my sister Emily as trustee. On paper, I had no legal claim over them anymore, but in reality, I had secured every penny I'd worked so hard to protect. Emily had been relentless in her advice. "Emma, timing is everything. Don't let emotion override strategy. He started this, and he doesn't get to dictate the terms of his own divorce." I remembered how she laughed the first time I explained William's latest complaints, how he criticized my clothes while flaunting his designer wardrobe, how he demanded lavish dinners while ignoring the work that paid for them. "Classic," she said. "He's out of control, but you're brilliant." Brilliance in that moment felt like survival. I felt no glee, no malicious triumph, just a cold, practical resolve. I couldn't predict how William would react, but I could control the assets that defined our life together. By Monday, my phone began to buzz relentlessly. Unknown numbers, blocked calls, texts that escalated in anger. "Emma, what have you done? You can't do this. This is fraud. I'm calling the police. You're ruining everything." I didn't respond, not once. Then came the pounding. Real, frantic, unrelenting pounding on the front door. The kind of pounding that makes your chest tighten. I looked through the Ring camera. William. Red-faced, mascara smudged from some earlier emotion. His hair a mess, from what I imagined was a mix of frustration and panic. "Emma, open this door right now," he screamed. "I know you're in there. Open the—" I stayed put. I didn't move. I called Patricia, who instructed calmly, "Do not open that door. Do not engage. If she or he doesn't leave in 5 minutes, call the police for trespassing." I watched him through the camera as he raged for another 3 minutes, screaming about theft, fraud, how I'd ruined his life. Then, suddenly, he collapsed onto the porch steps, crying. And strangely, I felt nothing. Not anger, not guilt, just tired. He left after 20 minutes. I knew he would be back. And he was. Thursday afternoon, calmer this time. I kept the security chain on as he rang the bell normally. "Emma, please, we need to talk," he said, voice tight, eyes glimmering with desperation. You can't give away all our money. It's not ours, it's mine, and you just—" I interrupted, calm, steady. "Talk to Patricia. This is insane. You initiated the divorce via text. You made your choice. Now, we follow the rules." His face twisted. "I made a mistake. I was confused. I didn't really want a divorce. I just wanted you to understand how unhappy I was." I shook my head, letting the rain streaking the window behind him blur the edges of the scene. "Then you should have used your words like an adult instead of announcing the divorce from a lawyer's office while I was working. You want out? Fine. But you don't get to take half of everything I built while you were learning to find yourself." He stumbled for words. He had none. "What's going to happen," I continued, "is that our lawyers argue in front of a judge. Maybe the judge sides with you. Maybe the judge sides with me. Either way, it's out of our hands now." He looked at me, broken, as though my calmness was cruelty. "I have nothing, Emma. You've left me with nothing." I let him stew in that realization. "I've left you with exactly what you chose. The house? Protected. The Mercedes? Technically in your name. Everything else? Secured. You wanted freedom. You have it. Isn't that what you said you wanted? He shook his head, the rain streaking his hair across his forehead. I thought you loved me. I did, I whispered, not bitterly, up until the moment you texted me from a lawyer's office. By Friday, the barrage of calls and texts subsided, replaced with the tense quiet of waiting. Emily continued guiding me through every step, every nuance of the law, ensuring nothing could slip through. I had anticipated the emotional confrontation. I had anticipated the texts, the visits. I had even anticipated the moral turmoil. What I hadn't anticipated was how calm I felt. Not triumphant, not vindictive, just in control. And in that calm, I realized the truth of our marriage. It hadn't been about partnership for a long time. It had been about convenience, comfort, and unspoken resentments. William had turned my generosity into entitlement. But that day, standing behind the locked door of our home, I reclaimed something far more valuable than money, my agency. The storm outside mirrored the storm within, but at least one of us had shelter. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and anxiety. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a cold glare on the wooden benches. I sat beside Patricia Chen, my lawyer, gripping the edge of the table, trying to steady my pulse. Across the room, William looked calm. Or maybe that was just the mask he wore. His lawyer, a sharply dressed man named Mitchell Reeves, radiated expensive confidence. Judge Margaret Sorensen entered, 60-something, eyes sharp, aura of, "Don't waste my time." She exuded the kind of authority that made grown men shift nervously in their seats. Reeves went first. His voice was polished, confident, almost theatrical. "Your Honor, Mrs. Foster has deliberately hidden assets, transferred property, and acted in bad faith. This is calculated asset hiding, designed to circumvent community property law. My client has been left destitute by a vindictive, premeditated scheme." I felt my stomach knot, but I didn't flinch. I'd prepared for this. Patricia rose, calm, precise, the picture of controlled power. "Your Honor," she said, holding up my phone. "At the lawyer's office, William Foster sent this text message. 'Emma, I'm at the lawyer's office, starting the divorce. You're holding me back from the life I deserve.'" This message was sent without warning, without prior discussion. William initiated divorce proceedings unilaterally. Mr. Foster responded by legally protecting assets he had accumulated largely through his own income, while Mrs. Foster was not employed full-time. These actions were defensive, not malicious. She laid out the numbers, line by line. Contributions I had made, funds accumulated, assets transferred, timing of the trust. William had initiated the divorce. He had no legal claim to argue against protective measures taken before official papers were served. Reeves objected, voice rising. "Your Honor, this is clearly a scheme to cheat my client out of assets she is entitled to." Judge Sorensen raised a hand. Silence. "I'll decide what it is, Mr. Reeves," she said flatly, scanning the documents. Then she turned her gaze to William. "Mr. Foster," she began, "did you inform Mrs. Foster of your intention to divorce via text?" "Yes, Your Honor," William admitted, voice tight. "And Mrs. Foster," she continued, eyes on me, "did you create this trust with the intention of hiding assets from your spouse?" I stood, heart steady, words precise. "Your Honor, I created the trust to protect assets I worked for from a spouse who announced divorce without warning. I do not consider this hiding. I consider it a defensive response to the situation he created." She leaned back, scrutinizing the papers. "Here's my problem. Mr. Foster, the timing of the transfers is suspicious. They occurred days after the divorce was announced. That suggests premeditation. Mrs. Foster, you acted within days, but you did so after your spouse unilaterally ended the marriage. You don't get to blow up a marriage and then complain when your partner responds defensively." She studied the documents again. "I'm going to split the difference. The trust stands. Mrs. Foster acted within her legal rights, if not the spirit of community property law. However, Mr. Foster is entitled to compensation for his contributions to the marriage, minimal as they may be financially." My stomach dropped. "You will pay Mr. Foster a one-time settlement of $150,000, the judge ruled, given that his contributions over the past 18 months were minimal and he initiated the divorce. This is fair." William's face went white. His mouth opened, but no words came. I felt a flicker of Something. Not triumph, not cruelty. Just relief. Closure. Outside the courtroom, William screamed, a raw, unfiltered expression of rage and humiliation. I could hear the words, "You ruined my life. That's nothing. I'll get a better lawyer. I'll appeal." Patricia gently guided me away. "Appeal costs at least $50,000 with little chance of success," she said softly. "Let it go." I didn't look back. William was free to vent, to rage, to learn the hard way what happens when you manipulate love and entitlement. 2 weeks later, the divorce was finalized. I wrote the check for $150,000, and he cashed it the same day. The house stayed in trust, the Mercedes in his name, all else secure. Through friends and whispers, I learned the truth. There had been another woman, his ex, a shadowy influence from a wellness retreat in California. She had been whispering in his ear, filling him with visions of escape and self-discovery, convincing him the life he had with me wasn't enough. Within weeks of the divorce, he had moved in with her, invested money, and spiraled into financial and emotional chaos. And I, Emma Foster, the woman who had once thought love was blind trust, had emerged wiser, stronger, and free. 3 months had passed since the divorce was finalized. The Lincoln Park house, the investments, the cars, everything I had fought to protect remained secure. The trust with Emily had been dissolved, the assets returned to me, and the ordeal had cost another $15,000 in legal fees and taxes, worth every penny, worth every sleepless night, every pounding at the door, every tense moment in the courtroom. William? I heard through mutual friends that he had moved in with his ex-girlfriend shortly after the divorce. The life she promised him, a glamorous escape, freedom from responsibility, hadn't lasted long. The Porsche he thought was his dream was leased. The supplement company she hyped turned out to be an MLM scheme. Within weeks, he had lost tens of thousands of dollars and any sense of stability. For me, life carried on in quieter, steadier rhythms. I returned to my consulting work with renewed focus. My career advanced steadily. I received a promotion to senior vice president at the firm. The money was better, the respect tangible, and for the first time in months, my mornings felt calm, unhurried. The house, though, felt emptier than it ever had. I wandered through rooms that had once echoed with laughter, shared conversations, and minor quarrels. I imagined what it would be like to sell it, to move somewhere smaller, more personal, less of a monument to a failed marriage. Maybe I would get a dog, something alive and uncomplicated to fill the silence. Occasionally, William's name would cross my mind. I reminded myself of the lessons the divorce had forced me to learn. Love is not measured by presence or sentiment. It is measured by action, by partnership, by shared accountability. Trust is fragile, and sometimes the people you thought would stand beside you choose themselves over the life you built together. I allowed myself a brief dalliance with romance, a cautious, careful step back into intimacy. Nothing lasted? Not yet. But it was enough to remember that connection was possible, without compromise of self or autonomy. I was no longer someone to be used as a financial cushion, a source of convenience, or an emotional crutch. I was my own. People asked if I was bitter. Not exactly. I was careful. More careful than I had been at 26, when love seemed simple, when fun and laughter could excuse character flaws and entitlement. Those things still mattered. They always would, but they were not enough to build a life. I needed a partner, not a leech. Someone who wanted to grow together, not take advantage of my generosity. And now, after the storm, the betrayal, the legal battles, I knew the truth. Strength comes from clarity, from preparation, from standing your ground when those you trust falter. I wouldn't make the same mistakes again. I trusted my instincts, my judgment, my ability to act when necessary. Sometimes I still walked past the empty rooms, feeling the echoes of what was lost. But I also felt the quiet satisfaction of what I had preserved. My life, my career, my dignity, all intact. And for the first time in a long time, the future felt wide open, not dictated by the whims of someone else, but shaped by my own hands. Emma Foster had survived. Emma Foster had learned. Emma Foster was free.